Hello everyone. Thank you for coming to join us in Theater 2. My name is Peyton Kutcha. I'm your room captain for this evening. Thank you for coming. I hope you're enjoying your day 3 at SAS Innovate. We've got an awesome presentation for you here today about security in SAS9 from Tony Brown. We're super excited to have you. We hope you've been enjoying your event, and if there's anything that we can do for you, don't hesitate to let us know. But as far as that, I'll pass it on to Tony. He's got a great presentation for you. Take it away.
Thank you, Peyton. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Security Changes Affecting SAS Systems. I have to make some acknowledgments. This is not all my material. This is material from a lot of people in research and development, from our technical support team, and from our SAS docs and pubs teams. I'm basically just the messenger because I'm a platform guy and a lot of this stuff is happening on the platform and all the OS changes are platform-based, so I get to be the one who delivers the information. So, we're going to talk about a lot of things today, and in summary, we're going to talk about cryptographic library changes for SAS security. So starting with SAS9 for M8, we can now use the open crypto libraries that are provided on the operating system that you're running SAS on. SAS web server is built on Apache web server and only supports one version of OpenSSL, which is the encryption that we're going to be going to in the future. And we're delivering OpenSSL 3 for use by the web server and for all the other portions of SAS. Likewise, the web infrastructure platform, the middle tier shared services database is based on Postgres, and we're going to go to OpenSSL 3 for that too. There's a big change in Red Hat Linux. Starting in 9.5, Linux is going to be deployed with OpenSSL 3.2.2. That's a big library update, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the NETENCRALG SAS system options you have to set to be able to move to TLS. And we'll talk about a few other things. So there's a bunch of changes in here, and we'll move on and get started on those. We'll try to keep this light and simple so it's easy to understand. So first, let's talk about the what. What is changing? So in the what agenda, we're going to talk about the encryption changes for SAS9 for M8, which is already out and going forward. We're going to talk about the encryption types and classes. We're going to discuss encryption at rest and encryption in motion and what's going on with that. There's a big change in Red Hat Linux, as we said. We're going to talk about that change in taking OpenSSL from 3.1 to 3.2. It's a rather large change, actually. And then we're going to talk about our change in use of AES for data in motion. We're going to start moving away from that. And then we'll talk about some FIPS enablement changes on OpenSSL 3.2.2 if you're a FIPS compliant customer, if you're government or quasi-government. So, we're going to go through a bunch of high-level information, but all the very dirt-level detail of everything we're going to look at today is currently available in our SAS administration guide online. So you can go to the security administration section of your SAS9 for administration guide, and underneath the security administration section, there's a section called encryption in SAS9 for. That's where you're going to want to go to get every link that's in this slide. These links and the pages are all live. This material is going to be posted in the Innovation website after the conference. You can download this and actually click on the links in the slides and go to all this good stuff. Now, every question you have, every detail of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that you have to do to make this work is going to be in the links that we provide in these slides, okay? Underneath the encryption set, there's a special section called Encryption starting with SAS9 for M8, and that's going to be the heart of what we're talking about here today. So the admin guide has got you covered. Now, in the blue box up here, when we talk about encryption changes for M8, the most important things we're going to talk about are TLS 1.3 support. We're going to talk about the foundation using the OS installed cryptographic libraries instead of the ones that we ship. Okay, we're going to go into that in detail. And we're going to touch a little bit on FIPS 140-2 support, which is important to note. So in Unix and Linux, right now we're going to OpenSSL 3. We still support 1.1.1. Be mindful that in Red Hat Linux 9 and later, they've come out with OpenSSL 3.2.2, which is the latest and greatest. If you try to install 9.4.M8 on that, you're going to get an installation error. We're going to show you an example of that and how to get around it. For ZOS in 9.4.M8, we're going to be using the IBM System SSL for TLS, and they also support FIPS as well. And in Windows, in 9.8 and forward, we're going to use S-channel SSP, and we're going to be able to use TLS and bcrypt. Now, there's a little link at the bottom of the slide that's highlighted in yellow. There's a lot of words on this thing and a lot of high-level information. If you go to this section called Cryptographic Library Support, starting with 9.4M8, you'll get the dirt level detail on all of this and how it works. Okay. So as a quick review, let's just go back over what we're doing with encryption. There are basically two encryption types that we use. Encryption for data at rest and encryption for data in motion. And the data at rest emphasizes protection of passwords and config files and in the metadata repository. You can also encrypt SAS data sets. We have a link here for encryption for data at rest. It's not going to change all that much. We're going to be talking mostly today about data in motion. In the data in motion, we're talking about the emphasis of protection of passwords in transit. You can protect traffic across the IOM servers and all the desktop clients. There's a lot in encryption at motion, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today than anything else. As a side note, whenever you use third-party encryption tools, there can be a cost for that encryption. It costs in terms of performance to encrypt something and decrypt something as you use it in a live motion. About 4 or 5 years ago, encryption products were horrible. We had people actually turn them off because the performance was so bad, but it's gotten a lot better. And the stuff that we do in SAS Secure, you don't even notice it. It's pretty good. Okay, there are a couple of different classes that we have availability on in our encryption. One is proprietary and the other is industry standard. If you've ever used SAS Secure, you're familiar with our proprietary encryption for data at rest and for data in motion. And this is going on in 9.4M7 and previous. We provided all the cryptographic libraries via SAS Secure. Now SAS Secure is going to be included on all orders. It's not an add-on. Obsolete NETENCRALG options, or your NetEncrypt algorithm options, can still be used in 9.4M7, and you can also still use them in 9.4M8, but we don't encourage it. We're going to encourage you to start moving to SSL, and we'll talk about why. For the industry standard encryption, it has data at rest, which we've always used AES for, and data in motion, which we were going to be going to TLS and SSL for. So for 9M8 and forward, this is the important part. Because the foundation product is going to use the crypto libraries installed by your host OS, okay, we're going to be using those libraries. We're not providing the TLS libraries, okay? The obsolete NETENCRALG options can be used, but we're going to highly encourage you to go forward with SSL, which is TLS, and not go back to the older encryption, because as you advance your operating systems, you will run into stickies with it, okay? So we're moving to TLS for data in motion. NETENCRALG options are present in M9. You can still set them to the old stuff, but we highly recommend that you move forward and come ahead with the times to A, be more secure, and to B, avoid issues of trying to move forward in the future. So in the first quarter of 2026, our SSL option for NETENCRALG is going to become the only supported option that hotfixes are going to remove the older options, okay? So you're going to have to go to this at some point. It's better to go sooner rather than later. It's going to be a lot easier, okay? We have a little link down there for encryption changes. You can click on that to get the dirt level detail on everything we're talking about in this slide. Okay, for data encryption at rest, not a whole lot is changing. In the past, we've used our proprietary encoding, okay? AES, SHA-256 for internal account passwords, proprietary encoding for password on disk and a configuration file. We're going to be able to continue that using that in M8. We're slowly moving over to everything else as we proceed. The big story is going to be data in motion. From the IOM server to the client, the encryption algorithms and SS protocol are going to be our story. All the older protocols, you can still plug them in and get away with it for a little while, but you're not going to get away with it for too long. As we progress the SAS releases in M9, we're now going to ask you and require to go to SSL, okay? Those are going to be the only options that are available in your NETENCRALG option category that we're going to support in 9.4M9. So it's important to note that. In the past, we've always used either no encryption based on what you do in your shop, or if you have encryption at all, you use TLS for these other things, and that will continue. Now, for the Red Hat Linux 9.5 encryption changes that we mentioned, starting in Red Hat Linux Release 9, okay? The host provided SSL library is going to also be supporting SSL 3.2.2 and TLS 1.3 and 1.2. That's a move forward. We all need to move forward with the times. The OSs are helping us hurry up and do that. So we need to stay with that, okay? So starting in N4, 9.4 M9 and later, that option that we used for AES in the past is no longer going to be supported for data in motion in RHEL 9.5. You can still plug stuff in and get away with it and manually work around it, but we're going to highly encourage you to stay with the SSL, stay current, stay safe, and don't get into other messes. This is especially true if you're going to be using FIPS. If you're a government or quasi-government company and you're using the Federal Information Protection Standard, you still can turn that on with encryptFix, and you're going to want your NETENCRALG to go to SSL plus your certificates. We'll talk about certificates more in a minute. Okay, so a word about FIPS enablement for N4, 9.4, M8 and forward. If you're not a FIPS shop, you don't have to pay close attention to this, but if you are, you really do. Okay, previously we delivered the OpenSSL libraries like we talked about before, even just with regular security. We documented how to build the FIPS-enabled libraries and how to install them, and we documented the use of the encrypt FIPS option to enable FIPS with SAS. And this puts SAS into FIPS mode so you could be FIPS compliant. Going forward now for 9.4 M8 and on, SAS is going to use the OpenSSL libraries like we said a dozen times already. FIPS is enabled by the OS, okay, on the host, for the host. The SAS admin must install this for you. And the encrypt FIPS option is going to enable SAS in FIPS mode again. Currently, there's an installation blip in 9.4 M8 right now if you tried to enable FIPS. We'll discuss this a little bit later in the presentation and show you with a screen example. There's documentation link provided below for FIPS, and I highly suggest that if you're a FIPS shop that you follow up and read that and then call us and ask any questions that you may have. Okay, so we've talked about the what, now let's talk a little bit about the how. So, the agenda for the how, we're going to talk about configuring OpenSSL for SAS 9.4 M8. We're going to talk about some FIPS enablement changes for the screens in SAS with the wizard. We're going to talk a little bit about TLS certificates and why they're important and what we're going to have to do with that. And we'll talk about the manual FIPS configuration for our servers and spawners for IOM and middle tier servers. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about certificates. TLS requires certificates. They can be self-signed, they can be third-party, they can be whatever. Okay, FIPS going forward will not allow self-signed certificates. We'll talk about that in a minute, okay? SAS 9.4 ships with a root trusted certificate library as a starter. Okay, you can read about that in the About Certificates in the Help Center. But certificates can be sourced from many different providers, lots of them. Your security administration may be getting or building your TLS certificates from another third-party vendor. You'll have to be aware of what that is, what operating system that's going to be installed on, and look at the availability for that. The OpenSSL library versions that are supported and tested with M9 are OpenSSL 3, okay, all the versions of 3, still 1.1.1 and 1.0.2, so we're still supporting those back versions. But we're encouraging you to move up to the latest that your operating system is going to provide you. In the case of Red Hat 9.5, that's going to be 3.2.2, okay? Now, if you're on Red Hat Linux 9 and your operating system is installed with OpenSSL 3.2.2 right now, which it's starting to ship, it's in shipping in RHEL 9, there's a particular hotfix that you're going to have to install, and that little hotfix is noted right here. You'll have to install this hotfix because if you don't, you're going to get a little error that says, I can't find my OpenSSL library, okay? That's documented in the HTTP guide. It's really simple to get through. If you have any issues with it, call our technical support staff and they can go through this with you really quickly. For those of you taking pictures, I just want to let you also know that this presentation is available on our website for you to pull down. You can have it all for your own, okay? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about FIPS enablement because we have a lot of FIPS customers in SAS. So prior to 9.4, we delivered the libraries, okay? We told you how to build them and how to set them all up. With 9.4 M9, the libraries that FIPS has to be used have to be installed on the OS, again, okay? and they have to be enabled by the operating system. And the encrypt FIPS option will allow us to be able to be enabled in FIPS mode. So the link in the administration guide is going to give you information about FIPS 140-2 SSL, how to acquire it, and its uses on your OS. I put that link in here. There's a whole lot of information in all of this stuff that backgrounds. This is the high level, getting you the landscape, but the details are all right in here, and I highly suggest that if you're a FIPS compliant shop, that you open this up and read it. So due to changes in the underlying security libraries released by RHEL 9, okay, the configuration of 9.4 M8 RHEL 9 doesn't install properly in FIPS mode, okay? We're going to show you a couple of screens on how to enable FIPS in this case if you're a FIPS customer. So first we have to see if FIPS is enabled on the OS. You can run that with a FIPS mode setup and check command and tell you that you have OpenSSL and what version it is, and you can see what you've got loaded and what library you're using for SSL. Okay, that's the easy part to see if you have FIPS there. When you're running through the deployment wizard to install SAS, and you try to go through the FIPS screens, and you say, I want to enable FIPS in 9.4 M8, and you check the configure SAS servers to use FIPS button, currently, let me go back, right there, and you press next on that, it's going to come up and it's going to give you an automatic screen, okay? That automatic screen is going to only give you one option to set up FIPS in 9.4 M8, and that's AES. And that's not what we want if you're a FIPS shop going forward and you're getting into RHEL 9 and things like that. If you hit the next button on that, you're going to get a screen that's going to come up, and it's going to throw an error, okay? It's going to throw an exception error. That exception error is going to tell you, okay, couldn't find the FIPS library. So to do the install correctly and get around the AES problem in 9.4 M8, just leave that box unchecked. And we're going to manually configure all the various servers later rather than doing them through this screen. Okay. Before we go further, we're going to talk about certificates for a little bit for TLS, because FIPS and TLS and everybody that uses TLS is going to have certificates. As we said earlier, they can be self-signed, site-signed, or third-party signed. For FIPS in particular, they don't accept self-signed certificates. They don't like those. They're not secure enough. Okay, and SAS requires that any certificates that we use and their associated keys when we're employed at FIPS have to be FIPS compliant too. So we won't be able to use self-signed certificates. We're going to have site-signed or third-party signed certificates. For all you guys out there, and I know there's a bunch of you who use self-signed certificates, you're going to have to think about going to the other kind, okay? So there's a lot of different ways to generate certs, okay? Aside from the ones that ship default with SAS, you're going to have to go to the documentation based on your environment, your OS, and your certificate provider, and understand how to use those. There's a special section in the administration guide called Configuring TLS Certificates and FIPS on Unix, and that'll help you get started. Now, the metadata and OLAP servers can be manually configured once we bypass that screen and didn't check FIPS, okay? So first we make sure that everything is in FIPS mode, and then there's some configuration files, and we're not going to dwell on these slides, we're just going to tell you that they're there. But basically in the metadata server and the OLAP server, there's the configuration files that we're going to have to alter to get them into FIPS mode and get them to be TLS compliant, okay? So, in those configuration files, we're going to add several parameters. One is going to be our NETENCRYPT algorithm, which is going to be set to SSL, no longer AES, DES, triple DES, or anything else. We're going to SSL to be TLS compliant. We're going to set our certificate location path, our private key location path, and our private key password. That's going to go into the user mods config file beneath the metadata and OLAP servers to make them work with TLS security. Okay, it's that simple. This is an example of one of the configuration files for the user mods, and you can see at the very bottom of the file where we have set those options that we just talked about to set it up for SSL. Okay. The object and connect spawners can also be set up manually, okay? they're not going to be able to use a user mod's configuration file, but they're going to be scripted and use a user mod script to the same exact thing. Okay, so basically, you're going to be able to add the following things to the object spawner script, and it's going to look just the same as the other one did. You're going to have the same type of options in here for your security framework, your cert keys, your trusted certs, and it'll list everything all out in your cert location, okay? You'll have everything in there to set up your script, to set up your objects and connect spawners to make them compliant, okay? That works both for the object spawner, and this is another example for the connect spawner. They look very, very similar. Okay, so this is a manual setup today in 9.4 M8. Okay, so the complete instructions to configure the mid-tier layer for TLS can be found on this link. The transport layer TLS and mid-tier servers link in the administration guide under security, under encryption. And more specifically for web servers, we've got the web server link, okay? So note that the web server can be configured for TLS at the initial deployment, okay? You don't have to do that later. Now, another note for Postgres, because this is important as we go to OpenSSL for hashing, okay? If you're using PostgreSQL version 14, beginning with version 14 or later, if you're enabling FIPS and you're a FIPS shop, the hashing functions required are routed to OpenSSL, and they're going to have to go up and become Scram SHA 256, not the previous type. That's noted in this particular document link that we have here. Okay, so in short, the changes are not really huge, except for the fact that we provided and shipped a bunch of encryption libraries. Going forward into 9.4 M9, coming out in June or July, we're going to have a path for you to go through to install this that's cleaner than the screens that you just saw, to set things up for TLS. We're encouraging you not to go back to AES or any of the other encryption types, but move forward to TLS and SSL, because the future is going to demand it. Once we get to M10 and later in M9, you're not going to be able to use the older encryption. Get it set up now, get it running. It's super easy. It just happens on install, and you just follow the bouncing ball. And the documentation in our SAS Foundation thing is going to guide you all the way through it. It's going to be relatively easy, okay? So we're creating some enhancements and support coming up. We're going to begin kind of a more streamlined in early 9.4 M9 process for you to go through to get your TLS set up. It's not going to be quite as kludgy as what we just showed you in M8. Okay, in M10, by the time we get there, we're hoping to have this stuff automated out pretty slick and pretty sexy, where you don't have to mess with it much. You'll show us where your TLS certificate libraries are. We'll enable TLS. We'll do FIPS. We'll do all that kind of stuff that you decide through the checkpoint screens of what you need, whether you need this or whether you need that, and it'll be a lot easier for you to set up. Right now, we got a little bit of manual going on because we're in a transition period, because the OS is throwing stuff out, faster than software groups can get ready to deliver. But we'll get over that hump, and by midway through M9 or towards the end of M9, this is going to be slick and sexy, and it's going to be easy. So that's the good part. So also, in future releases for M9, we're going to have multi-factor authentication, and everybody loves MFA. You can't log into any application on your iPhone anymore without having to get a text message to say, hey, it's me, I'm doing it. Well, now all of our middle tier and server tier operations are going to be able to be implemented with MFA if you so choose, okay? And also, as a side note for future, we're working on solutions separate from Unix and Windows to support IBM Z Multi-Factor Authentication. My partner Jiong Lee yesterday presented a wonderful paper on the MFA changes for multi-factor authentication in SAS. If you haven't gotten a chance to see that paper or didn't get to sit in his presentation, I highly encourage you to look it up and go through it and read it. It's very good, and it talks about how we're going to do MFA and how it's going to make you even more safe and even more secure. That's the gist and the overview of what we're doing, okay, for security changes going into the next couple of releases. It's really not that difficult. If you have any questions, I can take some now. If you have detailed questions, I'll be in the booth at the SAS9 section right outside our door. Okay? Thank you.
Amazing presentation. We can answer any questions in the meantime if there are any hands raised. All right, we got one in the back, and then I'll get you right after.
Hey, thank you for this presentation. My system sits on Windows operating system 2022. We migrated to M8 when it released in 2023. Do I need to apply this change, or my M8 is compliant? How would I know?
Are you a FIPS compliant customer or no?
No.
Okay. You're fine with M8 for now. You don't have to change immediately. But as we go into M9 and M10, you're going to think about moving to TLS and getting off of the older encryption types.
So that means even in M8 version, we still need to make a change if we are moving to M9.
You don't have to make the change in M8, but as you move into M9, the change is going to start slowly becoming mandatory.
Okay.
And in midway, most of the way through M9, that's all we're going to support.
Okay. And then second question is, everyone is getting pushed to move to VIA, and in order to move to VIA, you gotta do content assessment.
Mm-hmm.
In order to move from M8 to M9 or directly to M10, is there a content assessment available that can help that needs?
Yes, there is. My partner Joe Hatcher here gave you a thumbs up on that.
Okay.
We're trying to provide a path from SAS9 to VIA through both Windows and Linux, to be able to help you move there as expediently as possible. And because VIA runs in Windows and Linux, we've got a path there to do the content assessment, what it's going to take, what's going to run in, what could potentially run in SAS9, and what could potentially run in CAS, what it's going to take to move it. It's all going to be there to help you.
Right. So I understand that. What I'm saying is moving from M8 to M9 in the same SAS9 4, is there a content assessment?
Yeah, there is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And we got one more question right here.
I wanted to ask, so when you move to RHEL 9, do you have to do the changes or from RHEL 9.5?
Okay. RHEL 9 is going to introduce the 3.2.2 TLS library. If you're already doing TLS, you're going to have to implement the hotfix that we showed earlier so that you can get around that little problem and make it work. Okay. If you're not using TLS right now, RHEL 9.5 is going to start deprecating AES, and you're going to have to do it by the time we hit 9.5. Okay, you won't have a choice.
Okay.
So you have the SAS stuff moving forward, but you also have independently the operating systems moving forward, and we all have to try to stay in sync as best we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions in the crowd? All right, well, let's give it up for Tony one more time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Tony. Amazing presentation. We'll be coming back to you at the top of the hour. Let us know if you need anything in the meantime. We appreciate you stopping by. Thank you.